Hi, and welcome back to another episode of PSA People, Stories, and Accounting, where we get into U.S. taxes, how they've adjusted, and how they really affect U.S. citizens living here in Israel and abroad. So I'm Yaakov Jacob,
And I'm Philip Stein.
and let's dive into what we want to discuss today.
We took care of the older folk like me, and now we're going to go to the other end of the demographic timeline. And I think there's some real, Yaakov, it seems some goodies also that came into this bill. And I think we're going to try to dive in, break them down, and people should get an idea of perhaps some benefits that are going to come their way. And particularly, we're talking about people with children, younger children.
Yeah, and I remember that there was a time a few years ago that this was like a big hot topic and issue for audits and the like, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first topic, which I think is probably the biggest topic we're going to talk about today, is the child tax credit, and particularly the refundable aspect of it. And this became a very big thing. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. I remember when the law first came out, I think it was during
Yeah.
the Bush administration. I said, "There's no way this could be for people living outside of the US." I didn't really pay much. Why would they give money to people who are living in the US? Because the theory behind it was to stimulate the economy. Colleague, and he called me, says, "I've read this. It really applies to US citizens living in Israel." And I went back and I saw he was right. And this was combined with, at the same time, it was one of Netanyahu's uh, terms, if he was the Secretary of the Treasury or whatever, Sar, or Prime Minister, and he had cut down Kitzvat Yeladim, Bituach Lami. In other words, there was a dramatic, in my day, my kids,
Interesting.
we got a lot of money, relatively speaking, which we were able to save for them, but that was going down. Suddenly, this child tax credit came up. People who were not filing tax returns, U.S. citizens, or young families, suddenly woke up to the fact that there was this bonanza waiting for them, which would really make up perhaps a lot of that, not all of it perhaps, but of the bituach loan. So, I think when you talk child tax credit, and I think you'll address this, there are people suffering from PTSD, or a little older generation is suffering PTSD. And why am I saying this? Because people came came to realize that to get this child tax credit, you have to show earned income, wages, business income. And some of these people, they had the kids, but they didn't have the income. So I confronted this. I was at a conference, a very high-end tax conference in Florida, and I was so excited. There was a woman who was the head of individual taxes of U.S. citizens living abroad. Up to her, and I was so excited to meet her, and I wanted to discuss all the issues we face representing U.S. citizens. Just, oh, you're from the country of the fake tax returns. And and then it became somewhat, Yaakov, of a witch hunt. The
Yeah.
IRS sort of went crazy, feeling that everyone was committing fraud, and it got to crazy. I don't know if you remember the case where they asked us to, because one of the conditions is that not only does a child have to be less than 17 and be a U.S. citizen, but that you have to prove you're giving them half their support. And they questioned us like a 5-year-old. And I said to the audience, "Well, do you think this 5-year-old has a part-time job and is supporting themselves? How?" And they were reading off a script, and it was quite hellish as a from a
Yeah.
preparer, and anyone who was audited, it was even more hellish. You had to bring documentation from your pediatrician. It was just absurd. But
School transcripts. Yeah. No, it was pretty crazy that
we
time.
got through that, and it's been pretty smooth the last couple of years.
And I think we've seen a few different people that come away from that. We have a stereotype of people that say, like, look, I don't ask the IRS for the refunds, and then they should not ask me for anything. And they don't realize that they're missing out on
Which is
money.
a
And
shame.
yeah,
So why don't you tell those young families out there with children what they could be getting if they'd file a tax return?
for sure. So this is, the child tax credit refund is a big benefit for U.S. citizen families living in Israel. I don't know that it is a good enough reason to make your children U.S. citizens if you haven't yet, but
Okay.
it is a benefit if they are U.S. citizens. It's also commonly referred to, I find that Israelis will often call it the Kitzbat Yeladim and think that it's something similar to Israel where they pay it to you monthly or the like. It's part of your tax return. You have to file to get it. And how it works is basically you tell the IRS, hey, I make this amount of money. I pay more taxes in Israel than I would owe to the US. And by the way, I have a large number of kids that are under the age of 17, please give me a nice refund for each of those kids. And it's a refundable credit, which means that you can use it to offset US taxes. But in addition, if you don't owe that much in tax, you can get it back actual cash in your bank account or pocket, right? And that was always the biggest deal. It was for a large number of years until 2017. It was $1,000 per child, which was a nice amount. I mean, it covered some diapers and wipes,
Sure.
not too much else, but it was nice. In 2017, with the TCJA, President Trump in his first term passed a law to bump it up to $1,400 per child. And then it increased over time so that 2024, that refundable credit amount was up to $1,700 per child. Um,
So where's it
and
holding today under the new?
yeah, so it was 2000. It stayed at 2000 non-refundable, and then up to 1,700 of that could be refunded. Now with the new bill, they're raising it to from 2000 to 2,200 as the total amount you can get per child non-refundable, and out of that 2,200, you can still get. They made it permanent, so now you can still get that same amount that you were able to get before, and it will continue to grow. For cost of living adjustments and inflation, it will continue to grow every single year. Both the 2,200 amount will grow, the non-refundable, and the refundable portion will continue to grow. So you are getting 2025. I will double down here because there's some arguments I sparked online and I can share that. But it should be about $1,700 per child. And the law is written funny. And that is why it kind of sparked some machloket or
Right, but I
arguments
think it's
online.
for people, from my perspective, it's important for people to realize, yes, everyone would like to get that check, right? The 1,700 per kid, and it's easy to do the math if you have two, three, four, five kids under the 17. But if you're paying tax, if you're even if you're subject to self-employment tax, you're not in a you're running your little business or a bigger business, you're sort of feeling, wow, I have to pay Bitul me and self-employment tax. This will take the edge off that. I mean, this is you. Yes, you may not see a check in your bank, but you're going to be writing a much smaller check to Uncle Sam. So this is even what I'm just trying to say is that 2,000 it's real. It's not something that you say, well, I can never. Why can't I get
Yeah.
2,000 back? You may get to take advantage of the whole 2000. I think the message I would give, despite the little bit of history I gave here, don't be afraid. I think your point with is it worth it for your kid to become a US citizen? Well, if you look at it as a pure investment, yes, you're going to get what? For 16 years,
Yeah.
potentially, hopefully, if you're just going the refundable route, what do you say, 1,700 times
Yeah.
16 years?
Going up with inflation. It's a
With
nice amount.
inflation, yes, you will have some compliance costs, but if you're parents, working here, you probably have to be filing anyway. So it's
Right. Well, one of the other issues that come up is that if you were in the US for long enough before you came on Aliyah and then your kids are born here, they might automatically have US citizenship. And so to not apply and not file for them to then at later point in life have to
right,
the kids
right.
have to get a social security number.
Yes,
It's crazy.
that's a very important point. I mean, my own children were, because my wife and I lived in the States before we came on Aliyah, and they were automatically US citizens and got social security numbers. But my grandchildren, those who married, my daughters who married non-U.S. citizens, we did have to, you know, take them to the
Right.
States, or the parents had to take them. And yes, there are additional costs if you're not a U.S. citizen automatically. But I think every family has to do that
Yeah.
calculation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what they should take out of the calculation is being afraid to do, to
Yeah.
to file. Okay, so
Absolutely.
I hope that's what people take away.
Yeah, I will say one other thing that is a problem that you'll see is a recurring problem of people living in Israel is when you have those children, you want to get them their social security numbers as quickly as possible. And every single issue that comes up, the embassy in Yerushalayim, in Tel Aviv, will shut down and not help. And to set appointments can be very, very tricky. So COVID, they totally shut down for months and years, and it was terrible to try to get an appointment. Post COVID, it took them a
True.
while to open up. The war started, they shut down. The war continued, they reopened. Now with Iran, they shut down again. They just started to reopen now again. It's very difficult to get appointments. Very often you apply for it and it can take months until you hear back. And very often they will tell you it got lost in the mail. So I will say you need to get that social security number for your kids as early as possible. The second person you should call after the Moel, if you have a boy here in Israel, is probably your parents, but then right afterwards try to
And
schedule
I
that.
will give a tip. If you're in that situation again, if the kids are by birth U.S. citizenship, you're right. It's gonna be very problematic. But when my case is when I took those grandchildren, I happened to take them with their parents to
Yeah,
the U.S. We went to the State Department where, or where the immigration is. They got their certificate, and we walked a few blocks away to the Social Security Administration office. And really, if you do it in the States, it's pretty efficient.
much faster.
Okay, I
Yeah,
know the States is set up. If you give birth in the States, you probably, Yaakov, know this personally, you walk out with a social security number, right? It's pretty automatic. In my day, kids didn't get social security till they had to get their first job. Really, you could parents filed returns. It wasn't required. So, uh, social security, getting that number is important, is essential. Getting in Israel is tough. Getting in the U.S. is much easier, but that is also much more
yeah.
costly. So,
And you have until the extended date of your tax return filing to get it. So, especially now during the war, where we had extensions
oh,
until September
that's
30th, 2025, if you extended 2022, it's still available. So, you have all of these years, but I would tell people, definitely if you've had a child over the past couple of years, get moving on it. Make sure you get that social
got it.
security number. Otherwise, you're throwing money away.
All right, a few
Um,
years ago, it sort of caused a bit of a tumult within our office where Bituach Leumi started giving, you know, money to kids, and you could pick different what's the word,
that's
maslulim,
from,
different
yeah.
paths for
Ah,
investment, and because of, I don't want to get into all the problems of passive foreign investments or PFICs, but this was the government was giving your kid money. Okay, they were trying to encourage people to have when they turned 18 some savings. They were
yeah.
sort of saying we're not going to rely on the parents to take your Bitul Leumi check and put it in a savings account. And it seems that we've come to live with that. I don't know if where Trump came up with this idea or Congress, but there is something new here to talk about. So let's talk about
Yeah,
the.
I would say Rabbi Yudin from Fair Lawn, New Jersey, often says anytime you see anything and it has a makor and it has something from the Torah originally, he'll always say we had it first. And so
Okay,
I think here you could say something similar. Israel had this first, but it is very cool what is happening now, and it's really President Trump put into this legislation somehow, and they're called Trump accounts, which is something interesting. You got to love that. That basically they will be donating through some kind of mechanism that the IRS still has to clarify. $1,000 per child born between the years 2025 and 2028. That will be $1,000 that gets put into a savings account for those kids. And then the parents, regardless of if they were born in before, if they were born in between 2028, the parents can put in an additional $5,000 per child into those accounts each year. So even if your kids were born 2023 earlier, if they're under the age of 18, you can open up one of these accounts. You won't get that $1,000, but you are able to put in $5,000, and it can grow totally tax free while that child is growing up. So you have like you mentioned, the Bituach Leumi here in Israel. You have the Trump account in the U.S. by the time these kids are hitting the age of 18 or 30, whenever it is, they should have like they can retire, based off of all the money people are putting away for them. So either that or they will have enough funds to build their TikTok channel and really start launching it.
No,
So
but I thought their approach, and you'll give the detail in a moment. Often when I sit with a client, wealthy clients, and want to put money in trust for their kids, whether they want their kids to know about it or not. But usually in the trust agreement, they don't want that kid to be able to come to the trustee when they turn 18 and say, give me my money. They put,
right.
they say to a certain age, they can access certain percentage of the income. At a certain age, they can access the capital, or the Karen, as we say in Hebrew. It seems that the legislators sort of are following that path a bit too, in terms of when the money is accessible for the kid.
Yeah, so similar to how like IRAs or 401ks work, pension accounts basically, this is going to work something similar, but with a
Okay.
lower age threshold. So it's not going to be when you retire, you're able to take the money out. It will be when you turn 18, you will be able to take 50% of the account out for certain expenses and the like. Those expenses include tuition and schooling. It also includes a first time home purchase, though, and it can also include businesses if you
Wow,
are, have that entrepreneurial spirit.
that's
So, yeah,
nice.
that channel can actually work. And you can pull out a nice chunk of that money. That's at age 18. Once you hit age 25, you are able to get out all of it for those same qualified expenses and the like. And then once you hit age 30, kind of where I guess it's more like Kohanim here, age 25, you start learning a lot. Age 30, you hit it, then it fully unlocks and you're able to take everything out of it.
And all those earnings that were deferred, do you pay tax on that when you cash
Totally
out?
tax free, kind of like a Roth account would be. And I'm
Wow,
actually, yeah, I'm not sure how Israel will treat it. If it'll all fall under that Tisha Gimel in Israel, where maybe if the kids had the money in there before they made Aliyah, and then they come out and they take that money.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you know, can these accounts be self-managed, or is the U.S. government decide how the money is, or
So yeah, it seems like they can be somewhat managed, self-managed, but it does, we are going to have to wait on actual guidance from the
okay.
IRS here on it. Even the contributions themselves, they said basically like you can't start it or do anything with it really until 2026. But we're going to see. There's also mechanisms so that is the government going to pay it in automatically, or are the parents going to elect on their tax return and put the money in, open the accounts, and then get some kind of credit back? It's also one other thing that isn't so clear is this type of situation that we've had with some of these, and it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier with the child tax credit, is what happens if your child is born here in Israel. You're definitely eligible to open up one of these accounts and put in that $5,000 per year, but I'm not positive that the child will get that $1,000 rebate credit.
Okay, but it seems to me it's really, you know, much better than the classic Unified Gift for Minors Act, or if grandparents want to fund these accounts,
Yeah.
you don't have to necessarily do the full 5K every year, but even small amounts, we know, with indexing and inflation, this is really a nice thing. And as opposed to, again, I don't want to get too technical, but we've been living for many years with the 529 accounts where for use for educational purposes, and that is sort of
Yeah.
also one of the qualified purposes, you say. But very often for our Israeli clients, where tuition is so low, and let's say a grandparent is very generous, and the numbers can be quite high, there's like nowhere to put the money. Can't use the money. It's sort of trapped in there. And then if you want to untrap it, you pay tax, and it's this is nice. I think this is something
Yeah,
that
and you might also remember that we always had this problem with our clients which had kupot gemel set up by grandparents and the like. That was a big thing that used to happen a lot, right? Grandparents wanted to put money away for their kids. They put them in these kupot gemel. They would grow years and years and years, and all of a sudden they would start filing U.S. tax returns, and it was like, hey, that's actually a PFIC, which has huge negative tax ramifications for you as a U.S. person. So this is kind of a nice, safe way to be able to put money away for your kids and kind of let it grow. There is an additional mechanism for employers to put money away into, but I can't imagine that that would really come into play with young kids in
Right.
Israel. Like, I I'd find it kind
Unless
of hard.
that mythical 5-year-old who was going to work, you know. All
Exactly.
right, so now the third topic, and I'll tell you, it's. I hope you can. This is a guide to the perplexed. Some kind of tuition scholarship voucher that has also come into here. It's a little hard to understand. Um,
This is a weird one.
give it a shot, Yaakov.
Yeah, this is a weird one, but basically, I think for Jews who are often paying lots of taxes that go to public schools, and then in the U.S. paying for private school obscene amounts as well, this will come in kind of nicely. And this is basically a tuition scholarship voucher that you can get, and this works on a state level. It has to be worked out with the scholarship granting organizations, but basically, if there is an organization that gives scholarships for private school from K1 to K12, you will be able to basically donate to there and get a specialized tax credit of $1,700 per taxpayer. So it's just beyond regular charitable amounts if you normally give to, tuitions in the US, private schools in the US. Now you'll be able to get a bigger bang for your buck of $1,700 per taxpayer that you couldn't get before. It would have been a charitable deduction. This is a tax credit. So there's some
How do
benefit.
they compute that credit?
It is a separate, again, we'll have to wait and see how the
Okay.
IRS actually comes out with it, but it's separate from charitable deductions. So you can be taking the standard deduction and still get this $1,700 credit. It will, I'm sure, appear on the same forms that the child tax credit appears on and all of the other types of credits that you can get. So it'll be kind of it's just a nice benefit. I don't know that it will really help U.S. citizens living in Israel much,
Right.
but it's for all of those grandparents and people who do still have kids, grandkids in the U.S. It's so expensive, yeshivas there and the
Yes,
like.
of course.
It's a
But
nice benefit.
there's some element you point out to me that there's some state, depending on states into this. This is sort of, you might have some states that are
Yeah.
participating and others are not.
Yeah, it still needs this I would say more than most things in the bill still needs a lot of clarification and a lot of breaking out in terms of how it will all work and everything else.
Seems to me, although it's not who we're addressing today, but probably the private schools, there's going to be a lot of consulting of how to access these funds, because if people are
For sure.
contributing monies and they are for the non-public school sector, there's going to be a lot of competition for this money.
No, it should be a nice way of boosting what they're able to do, and then those kids who need the scholarships can actually get it. It should, the idea is that it should grow and strengthen contributions to private schools so that kids who can't afford it are able to get those scholarships and really be able to get the education that they need. So a net positive, I would say, for yeshivas and the like, and for people around the world, it'll be a phenomenal benefit for them.
So what's this week's action items for our listeners? What do they need to be doing?
Yeah, I think we've said a couple already, but the main ones is I would say get those social security numbers for your kids as early as you possibly can. If they are automatically US citizens from you, absolutely make sure to do it. If they're not automatically US citizens from you yourself or your spouse, weigh the pros and cons, but definitely do it sooner rather than later. Then you can see, okay, what kind of benefit is there for those kids being added to the tax return? And how do you file your tax return properly in order to claim that benefit as much as possible? I will say that lots of people miss out on the child tax credit refunds because they file their tax returns through TurboTax or some other way on their own. And they don't realize that if you file it in certain ways, you lose out on that refund.
I,
If you file it
I,
in
I,
others.
I think what you're alluding to, and I'm thinking what now I'm really dating myself, but 1982 when the foreign earned income exclusion came in, I think it was $25,000 at that point when it started out. If you worked, almost everyone took it. Everyone, that was like an automatic. Probably 90% of the tax returns that I filed took advantage of the foreign income. And then when the child tax credit came in, you may want to just say a few minutes,
Yeah.
we sort of shifted away, and it was like No one was using the foreign earned income exclusion anymore, which grew to 70, 80. I think, what is it, about 125 today or something like that.
Yeah.
It certainly makes for easy filing, but as you say,
Yeah.
TurboTax says, oh, guy lives outside of the US, exclude.
I
Then
will
you've
say
got
there's a lot of accountants also that live in the US. They know that. That's what they think about is, oh, if you live abroad, you don't have to pay on earned income up to 120,000, 125,000 per year. And so if you give them your tax return, that's what they will do. Done. 100 and, you have your salary in Israel, Gamarnu, you're done and
right.
that's it. And it makes it very easy. It has zero planning purposes behind it, though. It does not help you if you have pensions, if you have stock options, RSUs, anything like that is zero planning by doing that way. And you're also missing out on potential child tax credit refunds.
Oh,
Definitely you want to plan around that. So I would
and
say
it
those,
sounds
those
like
are the two
people
big
should
ones.
go. There's nothing to do here. Just, this Trump account, maybe you'll get lucky.
I will say the action item there is a very important one. I would say go to the Philip Stein and Associates website, pstein.com, pstein.com. Go to where the blog posts are, and you can sign up for the newsletter. You can rest assured that as soon as more information comes out on it, we will be shipping it out to our clients and updating people.
And we
So sign
really
up for the
have we
newsletter.
really have some time here. I mean, there's nothing to do today other than what you said before with the getting the Social Security number. But in terms of there's no there's no filings that have to be done. This will all sort of be captured when they do their 2025 return, and we should be up to speed by then in terms of you know the
Yeah.
the details. And with these, as you say, these scholarship funds,
I am sure any yeshiva that you went to in the past 30 years is going to send you an email being like, "Hey, you can now donate and save on taxes." So they will keep you posted for sure on that one.
okay, okay.
But yeah.
So we've completed another episode, and the sun is still shining behind you. There's no clouds in the sky. I'm still in my
Yeah.
home studio, and we're going to come up with some interesting stuff. We've taken the elder people, we've taken younger families, we've talked some other general topics. So people will just have to be in suspense for next week's episode.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a good one. There's one already cooking, so we got it
Good.
moving. Philip, thank you so much again. No, it's a
See,
pleasure speaking to you as
see you
always.
soon.